It's what we're going to talk about tonight is it's an unusual subject that's usually not talked about, and we don't really know. Most people don't know the answer to it. And the answer I give you tonight might not be the answer that you agree with, and it's okay. You know, we can all interpret Scripture differently, but I can tell you that what we teach here seems to help and help people when they don't know what to do because of unaccepted behavior of their spouse in relationships. So when is separation appropriate? Sometimes in any relationship, someone may be behaving in such a way that it's unacceptable for that behavior to continue and for the relationships to stay intact. You know what I'm talking about. You've probably separated from even friends. Their behavior is not acceptable anymore. And when that behavior wasn't acceptable, you may have just separated from them and didn't give them an explanation why. Or you might have even spoke to them and said, I want to be friends with you, but that behavior that you're exhibiting is just, not acceptable for me to stay in relationship with you. And that's kind of that's where we're going tonight. We want to give the person a choice as to whether we're going to be in relationship with them. First, we must come to a consideration, or we must come to an agreement. Okay? Now, the agreement I'm asking you to come to because I have married someone, because I have made a commitment to someone, does that now exempt me from obeying God's other commands? What do you think? No? God commands us to separate ourselves from individuals who exhibit certain behaviors. Simply because I am now married to a person and they are doing that particular behavior, does that mean now that I don't obey God and separate myself from them when they're doing that behavior? So it's a whole different way of looking at it, isn't it? Most people in most churches and counseling, says, well, you're married to them, you can't separate or you can't divorce. Which means that you mean I'm not supposed to obey God in these other commandments where it says that I am commanded to separate. So there's a conflict there, isn't there? And in these commandments where we're commanded to separate, it doesn't say unless you happen to be married to that person. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say unless it's your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, or a friend. It just says separate if they are doing these behaviors. Okay? Secondly, if you determine that it is appropriate to separate, then the separation is designed for the offender to miss the fellowship with his or her spouse or the relationship with the children enough to be willing to make the necessary changes for the relationship to continue. In other words, it's not done for punishment. Because, sometimes if a person is not willing to make a change and you're commanded to separate from them, then there might need to be a motive for them to separate, and to make that change. And that motive could be missing the relationship with you, because we don't like to be alone, do we? And so if they have a choice of making that change or getting help to change, or missing you because you're not in relationship with them, that's a good motive for them to get the help. There are many scriptures in the Bible which state that if we're married, we should not separate. However, there are other scriptures that state if the person is committing specific sins, and we're going to talk about those specific sins, that we are to separate from that person. And being married to that person does not exempt you from obeying God in that particular area. God does not expect his sons and daughters to live in abuse. He does not live in abuse with another person simply because we have made a marriage vow to them. Our promises to each other do not exempt us from obeying God's commands to separate. A marriage is a promise between two individuals to behave in a certain way in their relationship with each other. When we make this oath, or you can call it a promise in marriage, we have an expectation that the other person will be faithful to the promise they made us when we married. We have that expectation, don't we? Okay? If you didn't have that expectation that they would keep that promise, you wouldn't marry them, would you? Okay? So there's an expectation when we marry someone that they're going to do what they promised to do in the marriage. If we did not have that expectation, we would not have married them. Okay? Now, if the oath or the promise in the marriage vows are broken, is the vow still valid? Is it? That's a good question, isn't it? Is it still valid? Because if you asked a lawyer, because you know what? A marriage vow is basically a contract between two people. You know that? That's really what it is. I am promising you, and you are promising me, okay, that I will do these certain things, and that you will do these certain things, and that we'll keep this promise till death do us part. Now, if you promised someone, you say, you know what? I promised to pay you a certain amount of money for this. Or I promised to do a certain, thing for you. We make a contract. If one person does not keep the promise, a lawyer will tell you that the contract is invalid. All it takes is one person to not honor the contract, and the contract is then invalid. So if you have made a promise to each other, till death do you part, to do certain things, and one of you, or both of you, decide not to keep the promise that you made, in other words, you are not meeting the expectation of that person that you promised to meet, are you? Is it still valid? It's a good question, isn't it? And I think Jesus may answer this question for us. Okay? Jesus spoke about separation and divorce in the following scriptures. You have heard it said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. It has been said that anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, now listen to this, except for marital unfaithfulness. He didn't say adultery again, did he? In the verse right before that, he said adultery, didn't he? And then he changed it to marital unfaithfulness. Anyone who divorces his wife, or you could say any woman who divorces her husband, because it goes both ways, except for marital unfaithfulness has caused him or her to be an adulteress. Again, you have heard it said long ago, do not break your oaths, but keep your oaths that you have made to the Lord. Now, when I married my wife, I had an expectation that she was telling me the truth when she married me. When she made this oath to me, when she made this promise to me. Now, she promised me, and I promised her when we got married, that we would love each other, that we would cherish each other, we would honor each other. And I expected her to keep her pledge to me, and she expected me to keep my pledge to her. She expected me to comfort her when she needed comfort, and I expected her to comfort me when I needed comfort. I expected her to meet my needs that another person can't meet. In other words, no one can have sex with me and it'd be right except for her. I have an expectation that when we married that she will have sex with me and meet my sexual needs. And she has an expectation when she married me that I will have sex with her and meet her sexual needs. Okay? That I will comfort her, I will cherish her, I will honor her, I will respect her, that I will not belittle her in public, I won't do these demeaning things to her, and that when she asks me to do something because I am submitted to her, that I will do it. And my want to has nothing to do with me wanting to do it. In other words, if she asks me, let's say that she asks me, says, will you go to church with me? What's the answer going to be? Yes. Why? Because I am submitted to her. If she says, will you make the bed? Will you help me make the bed? The answer is going to be yes. Whatever she asks of me, the answer is going to be yes, because we are one. I am submitted to her. She is submitted to me. So we don't tell each other no. If I married her and I expected her to say no to me about the things that I asked her to do, would I have married her? No, I would not have. And if when we got married, if she expected me to be saying no to her about the things that she asked me to do, would she have married me? And the answer is what? Yes or no? Now, so let's define marital faithfulness. How would you define it? Based on what I have just said, how would you define marital faithfulness? I would define it as me being faithful to the promises that I made to my spouse when I married her. I would define it as her being faithful to the promises that she made me when she married me. Is that not how you would define it? So what if I'm not keeping the promises that I made to her? And what if she's not keeping the promises that she made to me? We're not being faithful to our marriage. We have broken the vows. We have broken the oaths that we made to each other. And God does not expect two people to be living in this earth in hell. We're not. It says, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. Although this is supposed to be a good, really, really good relationship. I'm not supposed to be living in abuse. I'm not supposed to be living with a woman who's not respecting me and putting me down and calling me names and telling me no and not meeting my sexual needs. I'm not supposed to be living with a woman like that. And she's not supposed to be living with a man who's telling her no and putting her down and not honoring her, not respecting her, not cherishing her, and not meeting her sexual needs. It's invalid. We're being unfaithful to the contract, to the promises that we made in the name of God. There's been a lie here. There's been a deception here. A deception. It's been an untruthful thing said during those vows. Now, you should not have married me if you did not intend to keep the marriage vows. That's what it really amounts to, isn't it? And I shouldn't marry her if I do not intend to keep the marriage vows, because there's an expectation here that I'm going to meet every need that she's got. Because no one else can meet the needs that she's got or the needs that I've got and it be holy. No one else. If she decides not to hug me, hold me, have sex with me, it is not holy for me to say, no problem, I'll take care of it myself. Or I'll find another woman to take care of it. No problem, we'll stay married and I'll get somebody else to take care of it. That's not holy. It's not holy for me to not meet her needs. She says, no problem, I'll let my boss take care of it tonight after work. That's not holy. I have been unfaithful to her. She's been unfaithful to me. It's not holy. And it causes us to really, really have temptations outside the marriage when one person or both of you are not being faithful to the marriage. The expectation of my wife being faithful to the marriage is not based on whether or not she's tired of me or not. It's not based on what she wants to or not. It's not based on whether she wants to make money and work or take care of me or not. It's not based on the circumstances of life changing. It's a to death do us part vow. And the circumstances of life is not to change till death do us part. I am obligated to keep my promises to her as long as one of us is alive. And she's obligated to keep her promises to me. Being successful in marriage, as we've learned in other classes, is a sacrifice, isn't it? I don't do everything I want to do for her because I really want to, but she doesn't know that. Because I change my attitude and I do it with the right attitude. There's many things that she does for me that she doesn't really want to do, and I don't even know it. Because she changes her attitude because she doesn't say no to me. So that makes a successful marriage when I'm going to meet her needs with the right attitude and she's going to meet my needs with the right attitude. Whatever those needs are, because we don't say no to each other, we're going to be faithful to the vows that we have made. I'm not going to be a liar to her, and I'm not going to be a liar to God. Because that's what I am if I don't keep that vow. Now, there are certain commands, or there are certain sins that even though I have made a vow to be with her, there are certain sins that if she commits, that even though I made this vow to be with her, to be faithful to the marriage, that I may be exempt now. Because God is commanding me, if she does these certain sins, to separate from her. Let's read some of this. You know, the worst thing in the world is for a woman to come to counseling and be sent back into a mess at home, an abusive husband. They'll say, well, you're married, so you got to go back on. You got to go back into it. No, you don't have to go back into it. Let's look and see if it's one of these sins he's committing, whether you got to go back into it or not. I don't send women back into messes like that. Or men, because sometimes men can be abused too. Okay? This is 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 5. There will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. You know what the next verse says? Have nothing to do with these people. There's not an exclusionary clause there that says unless you made a marriage vow to them, unless you made an oath or a promise to them. There's not an exclusionary there. It says have nothing to do with these people. So therefore my obedience to God comes before that promise that I've made to a person on this earth. It comes before that. Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 11. When you enter the land the Lord has given you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices a son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft or casts spells, or who is a medium or a spiritualist, or who consults with the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Revelation 21:8, the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, the liars, their place will be in the fiery lake and the burning sulfur. 1 Corinthians 6, verses 9 through 11. Do you not know that the wicked will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor the idolaters, or the adulterers, nor male prostitutes, nor homosexuals, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor normal drunkards, nor slanderers, or swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. It says, do not be unequally yoked, for what does light and dark have in common? And it says, come out from them and be separate from them, these particular sins. 1 Corinthians 5, 9 through 13. I have written you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people. Not at all meaning the people of this world who are immoral, or greedy, or swindlers, or idolaters. In that case, you would have to leave the world. But I'm writing to you that you must not associate with anyone who calls himself a brother. So we were talking about a Christian, someone who professes Christianity. Anyone who calls himself a brother who is sexually immoral, greedy, an idolater, a slanderer, a drunkard, or a swindler. Now listen to this. With such a person, do not even eat. It doesn't say, unless you're married to them. And then it says in verse 13, expel the wicked man from among you. Expel him from you. Or you cannot be in relationship with a person who's doing these particular sins, regardless of whether or not they've got a wedding ring on. That doesn't exclude you from obeying these commandments. God does not want you living in that junk as his son or his daughter. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 3 through 7. But among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality, or any kind of impurity or greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Neither should there be obscenity, foolish talk, coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. It says in the last verse, do not be partners with people who practice these deeds. Do not. 2 Corinthians 6, 14 through 17. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. Now let's define unbeliever. Okay? Because you can be a Christian and live like an unbeliever. Just because I profess to be a Christian doesn't mean I'm living like a Christian. How do you know what I believe? You will see it by the life that I'm living. Okay? Because I can be in these sins and profess to be a Christian and living as an unbeliever. You know that. I could be living in the dark, professing to be in the light. And that's what that other scripture said, having a form of godliness but denying its power. That's what it said in 2 Timothy, wasn't it? So I can profess to be a Christian but deny the power of God in my life because I'm not obeying God. I'm in so many sins. So do not be yoked together with unbelievers. What does righteousness and wickedness have in common? What can fellowship does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement can there be between the temple of God and idols? For we are the temple of the living God. As God has said, I will live with them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. Therefore, come out from them and be separate. Because a lot of women say, well, what am I going to do? I'm stuck. I'm married to this guy. You won't believe the vile things that he does. The stuff that he's looking at and the things that he's doing. It turns my stomach. I said, well, you don't have to be with him. Well, my pastor said I do. Or somebody else said that I have to. Oh, well, this scripture says you don't. It says separate from him. You're not supposed to be living in hell on earth. You're supposed to be living in heaven on earth. Now, I broke this down. I wanted to see who it was that if I was married to such a person that I must separate from them. So I broke the sins down. First of all, is someone who's living as an unbeliever. Okay? I'm not to be in relationship with them. Someone who is immoral, wicked, bad, sinful, living indecent or dirty. Greedy people, lovers of money instead of God. Money hungry, gluttonous people who have an uncontrollable desire for things. Swindlers who are cheaters, who defraud, trick, deceive, steal, or fraudulently represent themselves. Slanderers. People who tell lies on other people and false stories. People who walk around, you know what I heard so-and-so did? You got to know what they did. They're slandering. If someone comes to you as a Christian and says, you got to know what they did, if the two of you are not forgiving them and praying for them and God to bless that situation before the two of you walk away from there, you are in gossip and you are in slander. Drunkards. Individuals who use obscenities. They are indecent, smuttiness, profanity, cuss or swear words. People who use foolish talk. You're so stupid, you're idiotic, you're ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense, you're stupid. Coarse joking. Making fun of other people. Can you imagine Jesus finding a defect in you and say, look at him. Isn't he funny? How stupid he looks. Look at the way he walks, look at the way he talks. He got no teeth, his hair's falling out. But we do that, don't we? And we're not supposed to be treating each other that way, making fun of each other and embarrassing each other. One of the things God talked to me about, because we're talking about slander, it's so easy to get into slander you don't know it. It's so easy to be in gossip and you don't know it. And here's the rule that is in this house, and it's what I started teaching people. If someone hurts my wife, and my wife comes to me, let's say that she works downtown, works anywhere, and she comes to me and says, I am hurt. I say, what happened, sweetheart? My boss did this, or my coworker did this, or whoever it was did this. I'm going to sit and I'm going to listen to her very quietly. And I'm not going to try to fix it. And when she gets done telling me what she has told me, you know what I'm going to say to her? Sweetheart, that hurts me too. I'm married to you. What bothers you bothers me. What hurts you hurts me. Let's forgive them. Let's, not you. Let's forgive them. Because she has shared that with me. If we don't forgive them, it's gossip, it's slander. Do you see that? It's gossip and it's slander. Why are you sharing it? Why are you putting me into that? Unless we're going to pray for them. Unless we're going to forgive them and ask God to intervene and bless them, it's slander. It's gossip. And she does the same through me. You know, sweetheart, you don't believe what happened a while ago. I tell her, and she listens patiently, says, we need to forgive them, don't we? I say, yes, thank you for reminding me. So if someone's going to share something with you before they walk away, whether it's your husband, your wife, or anybody else, because you know as Christians, people come up and share things with you. Before they walk away, don't let them make you part of their sin. Say, whoa, wait, come back here. We need to forgive them, don't we? We need to forgive them. And we need to bless them, don't we? Abusive people who are boastful, conceited, and proud, always bragging about themselves, glorifying themselves and not glorifying God. They're acting like they're better than other people. Spouses who are unforgiving, or you could say people who are unforgiving, who have hardened their hearts and refuse to live in harmony with you. You know, if Lorian refuses to forgive me, how in the world can there be intimacy? How can there be harmony in this relationship? If I refuse to forgive her, how can there be harmony? How can there be intimacy? Love and unforgiveness do not occupy the same space at the same time. It cannot. And the more unforgiveness that I have to her, the more hardened my heart has become, and I am not loving her as I am commanded. I am not forgiving as I am commanded. It then has got nothing to do with my want to. When she says, will you forgive me? What's the answer got to be? Yes, I will. And when I ask her, will you forgive me? What's the answer got to be? She doesn't walk away and say, well, let me think about it. Now, I take that back. She may. Because she may be so hurt from what I have done. She may be so stressed out from what I have done. She may take her a few minutes to pray about it and come back and say, yep, I forgive you. Okay? It may. Does me too. Sometimes I go for long walks. People who are ungrateful, they show no appreciation for anything that you've done to them. Never admit that they're wrong. Never admit that they're wrong. They're not grateful for anything that you do. You know, it'd be so easy for me to never thank Lorian for anything that she does. But I want to appreciate her. I want her to know how much I appreciate her. I thank her for fixing breakfast in the morning. I thank her for fixing lunch. I thank her for cleaning the house. I thank her for picking up after her. I thank her for helping in the ministry. I thank her for going to Sam's. I thank her for fixing, I thank her. I want her to know I appreciate her. That I'm grateful for the things that she does. And she walks around thanking me also. It feels good to be thanked and appreciated, doesn't it? Some people never thank anybody for anything. And if you're married to them and you're never being thanked by them, I mean, at least thank him that he gets up and goes to work. Thank him that he takes a shower every day, at least. I mean, you can find something to thank him or her for. Thank you that you change underwear every 2 days, at least. You can find something to thank them for. We're to live in harmony with each other. We're to be grateful for each other and thank each other. People who are unholy and without love. Man, people come in for counseling and say, I haven't felt loved by my spouse in years. Years. What is that? God commands. That's the first commandment. Love God, love each other. They haven't felt loved by their spouse in years. Somebody's not being faithful to the marriage. Somebody. People who are rash, reckless in thought, foolhardy. People who are brutal, savage, inhumane, hard-hearted, mercilessness, remorseless, unfeeling, crude, and coarse, have no self-control, physically abusing, have no love, no mercy, cold-hearted, walking away from you, no conversation, not living in harmony with you, always blaming you. It's never their fault. Want someone who refuses to live in peace with you. And then we come back again and again to the sexually immoral. Now, again, the purpose of the separation is not punishment. That's not the purpose of the separation. The purpose of the separation is because you're commanded to obey God to do so. If the person is exhibiting these behaviors and refuses to change, if they refuse to be faithful to the marriage, refuse to keep their promise. Because I know people who've lived in misery for years. Do you think God really intended that? And I know the answer is no. That's why he gave these commands to separate from. We're not to be living in misery. Just because I'm married to someone who won't keep their marriage vows? The separation is for the purpose of obeying God. And the purpose is for the fellowship, for the offender to miss the fellowship. Enough to either change their behavior or get help so that they can. It may require some therapy. Now, when separation is considered, okay, in the event, if you consider that you're going to separate, that means you've already talked it over, okay? This should be with the assistance of someone that you both trust. A minister, a pastor, counselor, someone who can give you both good spiritual advice. Someone who you know will not take sides. The offender with the pastor or someone present should be told something similar to this. When you married me, you made promises to me to honor me and cherish me. With the behavior that you keep existing or you keep exhibiting, I do not feel loved, honored, or cherished. When you married me, you made vows to meet my needs, physical and sexual. I do not feel that you have kept that commitment. I love you. I love you, and I want the relationship to continue. However, I cannot stay in a relationship with you as long as this behavior continues. Okay? That's those sins that we talked about up there. Or being unfaithful to the marriage. Withholding. Not keeping the vows. My relationship with God takes priority over my relationship with you. God commands that I separate from anyone who behaves the way that you're behaving. God commands that you're to keep your vows and I'm to keep mine. For our relationship to continue, this behavior must stop. Or you must agree to go to therapy to receive help in stopping. The offender should then be given a reasonable period of time to make up their mind if they will stop the behavior or they will get the help. Now, if the offender, again, you've got to have a neutral person here involved in this. If the offender agrees that, yes, this is not acceptable and I will change, then there should be no separation, you see? If the offender says, no, I'm not going to, or the offender says, I can't, well, then will you agree to go to therapy so you can't? Yes, I will. I'll go to therapy. I feel like I can't do it on my own. I need some help. Okay, I got a problem. Whether it be male or female, you can have a problem. Men have problems. Females have problems. We get triggered. We do things that we shouldn't do. We withhold ourselves from our spouse. Men withhold too. And we may need counseling. We may need help to get that resolved. So as long as they agree to either stop the behavior or go to a counselor and get therapy so that they can change, then there shouldn't be a separation. But if they refuse to stop the behavior or start what they need to be doing and refuse to go get counseling, you're not left with any choice. Since you refuse to stop and you refuse to get therapy, then I'm going to have to obey God because my relationship with Him takes priority over my relationship with you. Now, again, give them reasonable time. Don't say, make up your mind right now, because they may get triggered. They may start acting on their emotions. Give them a reasonable time, 10 days, 2 weeks. And I won't say another word about it during this time. I won't say another word about it. But after those 10 days, those 2 weeks, then the three should meet again. What's the answer? I'm not going to do it. Okay. Then we need to take the steps for there to be a separation. Now remember, anytime there's a separation, the end goal is what? For there to be a reconciliation, not a divorce. That's not the goal, is to have a divorce. The goal is for this person, because now there's going to be a separation, for this person to miss the fellowship of the marriage relationship, miss the home, miss being in the home, miss the children, the dogs, the pets, to miss this relationship enough that they're willing to change their mind and either stop what they're doing or start what they need to do or get the help so that they can. And the moment they change their mind and say, yes, I will, and make the appointments and start the counseling, we should end the separation, shouldn't we? It served its purpose, you see? This is not for punishment. It's to give them the motive, the incentive to do what they need to do. Because we're not looking for divorce. If there is a separation, it should be a clear understanding that the separation is temporary. And it's used as a time for both to seek therapy, to resolve issues that led to the separation. Now, why did I say both? Because usually the problem's not this one, is it? Okay? There's other things that the other person has done or not doing also. And we need to get both sides repaired so that both sides can meet the needs of the other, so that both sides are not doing these unacceptable behaviors, so that both sides are meeting the needs of the other. Okay? And you don't want to find fault. This is not fault-finding time. It's not his fault that he's got this issue. It's not her fault that she has this issue. These issues come from our childhoods, don't they? That's where they come from. And it's not their fault that they got this problem. It's not this fault that they got this issue. It's not their fault that they got this behavior that they feel like they can't stop because it's something they're emotionally triggered with. It's not a fault. It's just a fact. It doesn't mean that they're less than somebody. It doesn't mean that they're defective. It just means that they got an issue that hasn't been resolved and is causing a problem within the marriage relationship. That's all that it means. So we don't have to look at her and say it's your fault or him and say it's your fault. It's just a fact. We can change those facts by counseling and therapy and finding resolution to these issues so the intimacy can return so that you can keep the vows that you've made with each other. Counsel should be sought by both to heal emotional triggers that's come from their own childhood. Emotional triggers that's left over from each other. There could be a lot of unforgiveness here, especially if you've been married to someone for years and years and years and they continue to be unfaithful to their marriage vows. There's going to be a lot of pain here, a lot of wounds here. There's going to be a lot of forgiveness needs to be done, isn't there? There's have to be a means of reconciling this. The separation is only for a period of time for these emotional wounds, triggers, and issues to be resolved. And if it is for an extended period of time, I recommend conjugal visits. Why would I recommend that to married couples? Because if that's not happening and you're separated, there's a lot of temptation, isn't there, to get this need met in unholy ways. But it's got to be through agreement. Now, in the event that the offender refuses to stop the unacceptable behavior or refuses to do what they agreed to do when they got married and refuses to go to therapy, this separation could end up being permanent. Again, the intent is not for divorce. But what do you do with a spouse who refuses to obey God and you're commanded to separate from them, and after several years, they've got no help. They've sought no help. They're still doing the same behaviors, and they've got no therapy. Now, this should be a last resort, and only after every effort has been made and you have given this person sufficient time to change. Now, this time can't be determined by me, a counselor. I can't determine that time. That's between who I'll call the victim and God. When God feels, when that person feels, after they have done everything that they know to do, and I know people who have come here that fits right in this category. They have done absolutely everything that I asked them to do. But their spouse didn't. And after several years of being lonely, of being separated, because the spouse refuses to change the behavior and refuses to get the therapy, what's that person left to do? God himself says it is not good for you to be alone. God says that. He doesn't want us to be alone and lonely just because we got a spouse that refuses to obey God. And I think these are the provisions that God has given us as Christians. When we find ourselves in a relationship with a spouse who refuses to obey God, refuses to keep their marriage vows, God does not want us to live in that junk, and He doesn't want us to be alone. Are we going to suffer because of it? Yes, we are. We're going to suffer. And we're going to suffer during that separation because we're lonely too, aren't we? But God doesn't want you to be alone the rest of your life. And I think that when it's time for that permanent separation to come, that person will know. But I can't tell them what that time is. That's between them and God. Now, we're going to talk about adultery also. Because, adultery happens often. And it's not just physical adultery. And in our today's society, we have husbands and wives who are committing spiritual adultery every day. Every day. Let's define adultery. Physical adultery is giving your body to another person. What's spiritual adultery? Giving your time and emotions to another person other than your spouse. The time and the emotions are supposed to be given to your spouse, you're giving to someone else. And that's done often in today's society. It's done on Facebook, it's done on emails, it's done on texts, it's done on telephone calls. Often. It's done with electronic games, it's done with stupid television. One of them sits there playing this game. And I'm sitting there going, lonely, left out. That's adultery, spiritual adultery. Giving their time to a game. Giving their time to animals, to flowers, to gardens, to boats. I got a boat. But I make sure I've met her needs first. Her needs have got to be met first. She watches television. It's okay. She's met my needs first. It's not adultery because my needs are met first. There's nothing wrong with us having hobbies, enjoying the outside, enjoying flowers, enjoying boats, enjoying ballroom dancing, whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with Facebook and emails and electronic games as long as you have met the needs of your spouse first. First. How do you know you haven't met the needs of your spouse first? They're complaining, aren't they? We don't complain where we feel loved. And if my spouse is complaining, that's not her fault. That's my job. It's my job for her to feel loved by me. Now, so I could be having an affair with an electronic game. I could be having an affair with a boat, a golf course, a friend, emails, Facebook. I could be sharing my emotions with somebody other than my spouse, but I haven't shared my body. I think it's okay. No, it's not okay. If the offender is in an affair, an emotional affair, or a physical affair, then it says, if he refuses to stop, that he's to be expelled. Expelled from relationship, not only with you, but from the church. Did you know that? Let's read it. 1 Corinthians 5, 9 through 13. I've written a letter to you not to associate with sexually immoral people. Not at all meaning the people of this world. Do not associate with anyone who calls himself a brother who is sexually immoral, greedy, or an idolater, a slanderer, a drunkard, or a swindler. With such a person do not even eat. Expel the wicked man from among you. So if you're committing emotional adultery, it's wicked. Giving your time, your emotions, it's wicked. You're in spiritual adultery. Can you imagine Jesus breaking the oneness of his relationship with the Father? And saying, you know what, I'd just rather spend time with somebody else. I'd rather be outside in the garden. I'd rather be with the animals, the flowers. I'd rather be on a boat with Gene. I'd rather be watching television. I don't really want to spend time with you. Is that oneness? Is that what you expected when you married that person? That they're going to be spending their time with somebody else or something else and not with you? You know, when I married her, the two became one. Every bit of my time belongs to her. Every bit of it. And every bit of her time belongs to me. And if I'm going to give my time to somebody other than her, to include working, I've got to agree to the hours I'm going to work because this time belongs to her. We're one. I'm not a separate person from her. So if I'm going to give my time or my emotions, my energy to anyone else but her, I need her to be in agreement with it. Or it's adultery. It's spiritual adultery. And I'm wicked if I'm doing it. I'm wicked if I'm withholding myself from her, not meeting her needs. If there's been physical adultery, then or even emotional adultery, trust has been violated. Which means the person, you are no longer trustworthy, if that was you. It's not the victim's fault that you're not trustworthy. There must be restitution for trust to be reestablished. Examples of restitution: for a specific period of time, anytime the offender is absent from the home, that he or she makes frequent phone calls from where they're going, proving from a caller ID where they are. Yeah, I'm going to Lowe's. Okay, make sure you call me. I will. I need to prove where I'm going, because I'm not trustworthy. Because before I said I was going to Lowe's, I went and met somebody. So I need to prove to her where I'm going. And I need to tell her I'll be there approximately this amount of time and come right back home. Is she controlling me? No, I'm trying to reestablish trust with her because I broke it. She may require me to change jobs if I'm working away from home because the person I was having this emotional affair with or this physical affair works there. And it's up to her to determine what restitution that I am to give. That's not up to me. I'll say, I'll do this and this and this to get your trust. No, it's up to her to say, if you'll do this, 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 and this, for this amount of time, I will try to trust you again. That's not up to me to determine. It's up to the victim to determine. The one whose trust has been violated. Now, if she says, I want you to do this, and I say, I won't do it, that means I'm not willing to do what I need to do to retain her trust. I'm just like saying, you're not worth it. I'm not going to do it. Well, you know what? Not only have I broken the marriage vows, I'm not willing to do what I need to do for the marriage to be intact. Whether it's physical adultery or emotional adultery, I'm not willing to do it. How can you have intimacy with a person you can't trust? Difficult to do, isn't it? She may say, you got to be home at a certain time. This is not negotiable. I'm the one that broke it. I said, yes, ma'am, I'll be here at this time. She may require me to go to marriage counseling. She may require me to break off the friendship, the relationship that has caused me to be in emotional adultery. If I refuse to break off the relationship with the person that she's jealous of, what I am referring to her, that person is more important to me than you. I got to be willing to give up absolutely every relationship with anyone that she's got a problem with, even if it's the same sex and nothing's going on, just to prove to her you're more important than any of these people. I am one with you, and I'm not going to be one with them. I got to be willing to give anything up, everything up, whatever it takes, to restore the trust. I may have to have an accountability partner. I may have to have full disclosure, and I should have had it anyway, of all emails, all phone calls, all websites. All that should have been done anyway. There should be a full and open disclosure. Everything. Nothing should be hidden. If I spent the money on somebody else, temporarily all the money may have to be transferred into a separate account that I don't have access to. And I may have to account for every penny that I've given. I may have to have an allowance. I'm not trustworthy. And certain places that I want to go and people may be off limits to me now. And I may have to patiently divulge my activities all day long. What'd you do today? Who was you with? What did you talk about? How long were you there? Who did you have lunch with? What did you talk about? And I need to be very patient in answering these questions, don't I? And not be angry with her and say, you're just nosy. No, she's not being nosy. She's trying to reestablish trust with me. It's what she's trying to do. And it's not her fault that she doesn't trust me. That's my fault. I broke it. I need to agree to basically everything that she asked me to do. Without it being an argument, without it being a problem. It may require a confession to others. Because I've violated the trust of her parents. It may require me going to her parents and confessing to them, to our pastor, to our close friends. I can't keep pride and expect for there to be intimacy in their relationship. Because everyone who is in a relationship with us, when I broke this, I broke their trust too. And I need to be humble enough to go and confess what I've done and ask them to forgive me. And if the children are old enough, I'm probably going to have to confess to them too. Because my lack of intimacy and relationship with their mother has caused a great deal of disharmony in the home. Even though they don't know what happened, I need to confess it to them. I need to show them by my spiritual leadership, this is what you do when you sin. This is what you do when you're wrong. You confess your faults to one another and you ask to be forgiven. What the Bible says, isn't it? You've got to make sure that the age is appropriate to do that. Again, I'm not condoning divorce. Divorce is the last option after all avenues have gone down. And it may be a number of years before that happens. Because you're supposed to go down every possible avenue that you can go down and give the offender every opportunity that you possibly can to change, to get help, for this to be reconciliation, for the marriage to stay intact. And it's between you and God if there's a permanent separation, when there's a divorce. Any questions about what we've taught tonight on when separation is appropriate? Any questions at all?